For this demo, I'm going to show you some changes to a Figma plugin our team is developing called Lynt. You can find this Lynt in the Figma community if you search for Lynt with a Y. Now, let me show you some very simple examples of how I've been using Cursor, my tool of choice, to be able to make changes to the actual code base, both visual and functional. When you run a scan of your designs to check for code gen readiness, you see a screen that looks like this. This link right here goes to a review of the issues that it identified, that Lynt identified. So does this CTA on the bottom, and there's not really a need for two CTAs. So with a few prompts and Cursor's help, I was able to remove one of those and convert it to the button that you see here in adherence with our design system as well. The goal isn't to take work from engineers that now designers are doing more work. It's to remove the stuff that really we can and should be doing to make these changes, especially as we're iterating and exploring and playing around with the things that we build and now finding better ways to design that. We're not going to our engineers to say, please change this button to blue, please change this heading to say X. We now can make a lot of those changes. Here's a change that's a little more complex where the team had built this tutorial mode. So when you open the plugin, you can open up this mode, have it teach you how to use the Lynt plugin. And I felt there just wasn't enough hierarchy to kind of scream at you saying you're in tutorial mode. So I had a general idea in my mind. I told Cursor to basically start making some changes, a blue background, some dots instead of this bar, and ended in this state. Now, about halfway through, I did pull this into Figma to make some refinements to, adding this icon and these specific dots. But most of it was built inside of Cursor. Again, not just the visual, but the logic change going from these 4 bars and saying step 2 of 4 to now 10 steps, which these 4 bars represent. One more example, this one even more complex. At the bottom of the plugin, there's a code gen readiness score, and before it had this numeric value that was a little bit vague and ambiguous. And I wanted something that looked more like a password strength meter. When you create a new password, you see kind of weak to strong. That's essentially what we're saying here, that 72% is good. It's not super strong, but it's good. So we made a change to render the bar as segments, 5 segments that are poor, fair, moderate, good, and strong. And having this label here instead of that numeric value. Again, all of this was done with Cursor's help, no engineering help. And I was able to make not just the visual changes, but the logic as well. I'm not a programmer. I would never know how to, use this percentage to render 5, possible score ratings as labels. But with Cursor's help, that was rather easy to do. What I'd like to do with you now is zero in on this particular element. We want to change these 4 bars, which represent 10 steps. So when you're step 2, you actually have 3 or 4 steps inside of that one. We want to change that to these dots here. We've got 10 dots representing your progress throughout the tutorial. So let me show you the environment that I have set up to be able to do that. I love using the GitHub desktop app for Mac, and the team has set me up with access to GitHub. I can make branches. I can utilize existing branches. So I've created a branch here called Fix Change Score to Bars. And that's the branch that we're going to make these changes on. So if I now go over to Cursor, this is what my Cursor environment looks like. I've got the agent prompting section here on the left, this open space for essentially working with code if I desire, and then a few tools here to actually get into the the file tree and find files if necessary. I'm going to verify that I'm in the branch that I want to change. That is the one. Great. Now to start working in a local environment where I'm actually seeing my changes real time, I need to start up a dev server. And there are 2 ways to do that. I can come in here. Let's close this terminal. There we go. Come in here and essentially type that command right here. Or I could say, hey, Cursor, just start up my dev server. I'm comfortable working right here with that command. I've got those saved up. You can see that command that I just inserted. And now my dev server is running, which means this. I can go find that plugin. Here's the one that you can get in the community. But my local copy that's tied into the code base looks like this. So now this is not a Figma prototype. This is the real deal, the legit plugin, my local copy of it running inside of Figma. So now that I've started up the dev server, any changes I make here are going to be shown in that plugin. So let me show you how this works. I'm just going to change this heading right here. And I could say, hey, cursor change the heading to whatever. But just to show you quickly here, because I know I can find that file by searching for welcome to, there it is. I'm just going to say welcome to Lynt, folks, exclamation point. Now, when I hit save, watch what happens. It's going to close that plugin and reopen it, showing the change that I just made. So now I can actually real time be making those changes. Now, you don't necessarily need cursor to make a text change like this. You've been able to do this even as a designer for a very long time. But it's once you start getting into more complex visual changes and being able to even change some of the logic, that's really where the AI-assisted tools become much more powerful. So let's undo that change. We don't want to make that. Great. We'll get rid of that. Okay. So now, again, we want to change. This is the old tutorial. Let's open that up. And you see the old version of the tutorial here. We want to turn those bars into dots and remove this step of 4. We got to have 10 of those dots instead of 4. So I'm going to go over here and say to cursor, let's change the tutorial header. I could use just quick sentences, bullets, whatever. I'm going to say, let's change the 4 bars to 10 small dots. Position the dots at left. Each dot represents one step in the process. There are, I don't have to worry about typos. It gets it. There are 10 steps in the process. I'm really getting messy with my typos here. That's fine. Let's see. What else do I need to tell it? How about remove the step 1 of 4 as that's not needed. Being really liberal with my typos, as you can see here. So that's probably good enough to start. Let's, keep everything else the same, including the max, the full width. All right, I think we're ready to go. So let's start that. This is probably going to take a minute or two, as it's got to go begin making a plan, probably checking for what exists in terms of components. And eventually it's going to render its first pass at making that change. And when it does, you'll see that plugin close, open again, and then inside of the plugin, you'll see those changes. Okay, so cursor's starting to wrap up its work. So now it's closing the plugin as it saves its work. And when it's done, we're going to open up the tutorial and see how it did. Okay, so here we go. Let's see how it did in its first pass. We'll open up the tutorial. Hey, there we go. We have 10 dots. They're positioned on the left. Everything else looks the same. Let's actually see, though, if those dots are functional. So we're going to do, it says select the facegram screen as step 1. Great. Now I'm going to tap the Lynt design button as step 2. Okay, good. We see those dots progressing. I need to review the auto fixes, so I tap that. I need to proceed to the next step, and I see that dot is, okay, good. So you can see that not only did it change the visuals, but some of the functionality on the back end. So it was this process, going through this process, that eventually I was able to land at this state right here when it was all said and done. You can see that again inside of the plugin, inside of the community. So once again, the goal is not to take all this work from engineers and now designers have to do a lot more. It is to allow us to iterate and to really design in the medium where our designs are going to be rendered, rather than kind of fake prototyping or working with static screens. I can really see those changes real time. And if I really wanted to do this right, I would use Lynt to, first of all, check this design for code readiness, and then plug it into cursor. But that is another tutorial for another day. Now, the final piece to all of this is where it gets really exciting, is I can commit those changes that I've made. So let's pretend I've finished all of that work and it now looks like this. I'm going to go back to GitHub. I'm ready to go. So I'm going to say, this is my commit message here. I'm going to say fix tutorial changes, whatever I might say, add a description. And then if I commit these changes, then I can open up a PR, or basically a code review, for an engineer who will look at what cursor and I have changed And if they approve it, it will go into the staging environment and eventually make it into production. So now I'm actually impacting and changing the code base with what I'm doing on my end. Again, a lot of this previously was done by engineers. They can now focus on the things that only they can do, that the things are really important to their work, rather than us, asking them to make all of these series of changes. But for us as well, it's not just about like changing a blue button or a heading. It's like it's working in the environment where our designs are rendered. This is what we did 20 years ago, 25 years ago when I first started designing. We were working in HTML and CSS and in the browser, and we could see the iterations and the changes that we were making. So I look at the AI revolution, not so much as a revolution, but a renaissance. We're kind of going back to enabling designers to build and design and iterate in the very place where their designs are going to be executed. And that's, I think, the most exciting part to me. Oh, I forgot to mention this. This is not about eliminating Figma or having a canvas to just explore design without worrying about how it's going to be rendered. That's not the point. In fact, during this process, I got to a point where I needed to jump into Figma. Even though I started making those changes inside of Cursor, I needed to jump back into Figma to kind of explore blue sky. What are my options for rendering this bar? It isn't just the labels and in the segments, but there's actually another component where if you disable one of the rules that Lynt checks for, you actually cannot achieve the max score. So I was like, how do I show that? Is it like these diagonal hatches? Is it a lock? And then I eventually got to a point where I landed in the bottom one that you now see in the production version of the plugin. So there is still very much a need for getting into Figma, whether you start there or jump back in midway. I don't see that going away anytime soon, at least not until the tools themselves are good enough to allow for both the blue sky canvas exploration as well as the actual execution and rendering of that design into code.